I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, New Year always brings with it lots to wonder about, including what will be the prevailing political issues, or perhaps more importantly, how deep can the Saints go into the playoffs? We'll be looking for answers, plus examining why lawmakers are bailing out of the legislature, as well as an attempt to divert tourism revenue, plus what to expect from the new carnival season and hard time on the court for the Pelicans. In our court are tonight's Informed Sources: Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources; Stephanie Grace, columnist, The New Orleans Advocate; Jeff Duncan, sports columnist, NOLA.com, The Times-Picayune; and Kevin McGill, reporter, The Associated Press. We're going to go over to Stephanie first. Start of a new year and really the return of some longstanding political issues, but maybe some new ones coming up.
Correct. We're going to start off with some old ones, I think. If you look at the city, what the city's up to. Short-term rentals, it's been an issue for a couple of years. It was a huge issue on the campaign trail when city council members ran, and they are looking at really doing something about it this year. They're looking at restricting the use of the availability of single-family homes for out-of-town rentals. It's going to be a big fight. The industry, Airbnb, other companies are really ramping up to try to fight it. They have a big PR campaign you may have seen online. So there's going to be a series of hearings, Council, Planning Commission, and several opportunities for people to come and speak, and I'm sure they will because they always do. Also on the city front, there are a couple of millages that will be on the ballot in the spring. 2 different millages, 2 different dates, both low turnout elections, which is when politicians generally put millages up. But one is supported very strongly by the mayor, LaToya Cantrell, and this is a renewal. It's not an increase, and it's for recreation. It's supposed to go to several entities: Audubon, City Park, and also the City Recreation Commission and Parks and Parkways. Audubon, you'll remember, had this millage that lost a number of years ago, extension. They're willing to come back and take less. They kind of have to come back and take less, so that's part of the deal. So the mayor's going to be pushing that, and that is in May. That's the beginning of May.
And for the first time, City Park would actually be getting some
city funding,
yeah.
And of course, City Park is immensely popular. Right. So that's, I think, one of the sweeteners for people who maybe oppose the Audubon piece of it.
Right.
And there's another millage that actually the city council put on against the mayor's wishes, and that's pretty unusual. That one's coming up first, and that one is an increase for the Council on Aging. It's supposed to support Meals on Wheels services for the elderly. The mayor has concerns about this. One is it would be money going to an outside entity, and that's part of her kind of overall political strategy, is to try to bring money back under city control and watch how it's handled. And it's also that, of course, she supports the idea of supporting the elderly, but she also has a number of other priorities, mental health, and she kind of was hoping to do something broader.
And it would be a dedication of a certain amount of funds. And the council already gets some money already from the general fund, doesn't it not?
Yes, I don't know the numbers exactly. Yeah. So, but it would be a dedicated millage, a dedicated property tax millage, so that would be new. And New Orleans voters have been a little resistant to millages lately, not all of them, but some of them. So the idea that there are 2 coming up in close proximity, I think, will be interesting politically.
On a statewide level?
On the statewide level, I think the big push is going to be for teacher pay, which is something that really everybody on paper supports. The governor, John Bel Edwards, he said it's his top priority. He wants to give teachers at this point $1,000, $500 for support workers. It will probably still be a political fight because even though the Republicans support it for the most part, there could be some issues over how much and who gets what share, and also where the money comes from, whether it comes from existing money, whether it's a little technical, but whether there's something called the Revenue Estimating Conference, where they recognize forecasts that show that we're supposed to get more revenue and then can spend it.
Yeah, essentially the Republicans have been saying they're saying we have more money than we may actually have coming in. So, but that's the money the governor wants to use for the teacher pay.
Correct. So that's kind of held up now because of a procedural. They've thrown some breaks in something that's normally a procedural kind of no-brainer. So we're going to wait. And it's interesting because it's something everybody agrees on, that teachers have really fallen behind in, Kathleen Blanco had brought them up to the Southern average, and they've really fallen behind since then. So how we get there, I think we will get there, but it's an election year. So they'll be fighting.
And minimum wage, do you think we'll
minimum
see
wage, the governor is going to try again. This year, This year, 20 other states have raised their minimum wage in some form. The governor has been trying. He ran on the issue. He was elected. The legislature is very pro-business, very anti-raising the minimum wage. His proposal is very, very modest. It's to basically bring it up to $8.50 over 2 years, and he just kind of can't get it out, but he thinks it's really important, and he's going to keep trying.
Are we going to see, do you think, any sort of change in attitude in the legislature? Or will it be more of the same?
More of the same. So.
Okay.
Do you think that the short-term rental thing might come up at the legislature as well?
It might. That's something that's happened in some other states too, and it also, it's something that happened, remember, with Uber and with, this is a.
They don't get what they want at the local level, so one
Right.
side or the other goes to the state
And it's all
legislature.
just a new thing, so kind of how to regulate any of these entities, these gig economy online entities, is people are still really working it out and governments are working it out.
All righty. We'll be taking a look over the next couple of months, what comes ahead. Thanks a lot, Steph. Okay, Jeff, the immediate weeks ahead. Everybody's really very excited about the possibility of the Saints going on to the Super Bowl.
Well, I think they got a great shot. I mean, that's, I would think it would be, at this point, probably a great upset if they don't make the Super Bowl. They have 2 games in the Superdome. We all know the record, right? In the playoffs under Sean Payton with Drew Brees quarterbacking, they're 5-0. They've never lost. Actually, going back to the Jim Haslett era, they've won 6 games in a row in the playoffs in the Dome. They're 1-5 on the road. This has been the goal of this team and Sean Payton all year long, to be able to get to this exact position, to be playing in the Dome and that great home field advantage. I think right now they have a great shot. Once they get to the Super Bowl, it's kind of a 50-50 proposition, but I'll be shocked if anybody can come in there in that environment with this team right now and beat them. I know that they lost to Carolina in the last week of the season, but that was a threadbare lineup, a lot of players, a lot of key starters, including Drew Brees not playing. I discount that. I really think this team is the most complete team Sean Payton has had.
What did
Defense,
happen?
special teams, everything.
What did happen though against Dallas, where Dallas?
Well, they just got beat,
Really did.
Harold. I mean, they just lost. So, it happens. You go on the road, you play a good team on the road. I think Dallas needed that game more than they did. And I think it was kind of a wake-up call. And I actually think that loss to Carolina was exactly what Sean Payton wanted. I almost think he was sandbagging to some degree. I've written about this before. His mentor was Bill Parcells. He used to have this term, you have to create a crisis when things are going well to kind of galvanize the team, to get their attention. I think that loss was exactly what he wanted. And now he has their full attention, and he's got them on edge a little bit for practice this week. And it's an awkward position because they don't know who they're going to play right now.
Yeah.
They'll find out this weekend, but I don't see anybody coming in and beating them in the Superdome. It's going to take a perfect performance. Pittsburgh, a couple weeks ago, one of the best teams in the league, came in and played as well as anybody, and they still couldn't pull it off.
Who would the Saints like to play, do you think?
I don't think they have a feeling that way one way or the other. I kind of think maybe they would like to have Dallas, a shot at Dallas again. Mentally, the edge of getting a revenge, I think that works to their favor. Not to mention their quarterback, Dak Prescott, is from Mississippi State, Houghton, Louisiana native. He's a young, inexperienced quarterback. I think anybody that's going to come in and beat the Saints in the Dome has to be experienced, like what we saw Ben Roethlisberger a couple weeks ago, who's used to playing in those frenetic environments on the road. Philadelphia has Nick Foles, of course, who won the Super Bowl. And then the other quarterback would be Russell Wilson, who I think is very dangerous. So I think Seattle would be the team the Saints would least want to play, just because I think the matchup would favor Seattle as far as the quarterback.
How's the team health-wise?
Well, that's one of the best situations they've had. They're probably the healthiest team in the entire NFL. Their left tackle, Terron Armstead, is a concern. He tried to come back. He has a torn pectoral muscle, and that's a soft tissue injury. He's very finicky. He tried to come back and left the game midway through.
Yeah, we saw him holding
Yeah,
on to his
right.
chest.
And I don't know if he'll hold up. He's going to try and tough it out and play through it. Andres Pete was in the locker room the other day with a wrist injury. It looked like he had a huge Q-tip on his wrist. It's all wrapped up. As you know, playing offensive line, you got to have your hands. So I think they're a little banged up on the line, but relatively speaking, when you look around the league, the Saints are healthier than just about anybody.
So, go ahead, E.
Let me ask just a big if question. If it hadn't have been for that pass at the end of the Minnesota game last year, would the Saints have gone on to win the Super Bowl?
I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. I think a lot of people are saying, because they beat Philadelphia this year, they would have beaten them last year. I'm not sure that's the case. Going to Philadelphia, as well as they were playing last year, I don't know if they would have beaten Philadelphia. Philadelphia, by the end of the year last year, and in the playoffs, I think proved it in the Super Bowl against New England. They were and I think they would be a tough team for the Saints to play this year because they just beat them 48-7. And if you listen and read a lot of what the Philadelphia Eagles are saying, they say that loss was their wake-up call, and they've been playing very well since, and they're the defending champions. So they wouldn't come in to this environment, I think, intimidated, but they've got a tough assignment going to Chicago.
So walk us through the next few weeks, or at least the next couple of weeks, as far as the Saints are concerned.
Well, I mean, they would play most likely they're going to play the winner of the Dallas-Seattle game. Unless Philadelphia goes on the road and upsets Chicago, which is unlikely, Philadelphia would come here in that case. So they would have the game. The game is next Sunday, a week from Sunday, I should say, in the Superdome. It's the last game. The networks were all battling over trying to get the Saints. They're very high profile. They have the highest ratings in the league. It's really remarkable, the interest level. One of the Saints executives told me this year that a normal amount of no-shows at a Saints game, or at an NFL game in general, is about 5,000 people that just don't show up for a game. The Saints, because of their general interest in the local market, they routinely have about 2,000 no-shows. Saints games this year, 500 no-shows.
Really?
It's unheard
That's
of.
amazing, right?
Every seat is filled, and the ratings are off the charts in this market. The interest level has never been greater.
This weekend, a bye for them.
This weekend's a bye. They find out who they're
rest
going
up.
to play, and then they start game planning next week.
And they were on national TV a good bit this season.
5 times, correct. And the networks, like I said, they all want the New Orleans Saints. The ratings go through the roof, not only locally but nationally, because they have so many high-profile stars on the team now, with Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, Mike Thomas, Cameron Jordan. It's very much a high-profile,
So
high-interest
it used to be at the Dallas Cowboys were the favorites in terms of the national audience. So we've beaten the Cowboys at that.
And I would tell you this, that the one thing that's changed since I've covered the team 20 years is that interest level. I remember going on the road, and there would be no Saints fans at road games. The Saints now are like the Green Bay Packers, the Cowboys. They're a national brand, even international. When we go to London, an enormous amount of Saints fans over there. They travel, they pack opposing stadiums. It's something that wasn't the case 2 decades ago.
Well, we're certainly seeing Saints fans sporting their black and gold everywhere now. You see it all over town.
All over the city.
All right, thanks a lot, Jeff. Over to Kevin. Tourism tax dollars, boy, a lot of folks covet those.
Yeah, the Mayor Cantrell is just the latest in a line of New Orleans politicians who've been saying that the city doesn't get its fair share of hotel taxes. There was a 2015 report by the Bureau of Governmental Research, the nonpartisan watchdog agency. They broke it down like this: the hotel taxes and fees pull in about $166 million, according to those figures. A lot of that goes, I guess about nearly a third of that goes to the Stadium and Exposition District, that is to say the Superdome and the Arena, but almost 27% to the Montreal Convention Center Authority, another 17% to a couple of tourism agencies. And we're talking about $166 million, probably more in the years since. There will be, I expect, sometime early this year, another BGR report outlining all of this. Mayor Cantrell is not the latest, is not the only person to do this. Mayor Landrieu did it before her. We made a pitch for reallocating some of that money. They said, now, on the other side, the tourism industry, the people who are backing not reallocating these taxes, say that these are big tourist draws. They generate tax money just in day-to-day tourism-related commerce, and that diverting money from say the Superdome or the Arena or the Convention Center would mean possibly delaying needed upgrades and maintenance, and in the NFL especially, the owners and the league looks at the modernity of a stadium and things like that. Again, back to the city, they would say that, look, the NFL, the NBA, the Convention Center, those are all important, but they are not solely what draws people to New Orleans. And if the city's infrastructure is crumbling and the city itself is having problems in various areas, that is going to be a dig into tourism as well. So the question now is, can LaToya Cantrell do now what a lot of politicians have tried in the past? Diverting this money, changing any allocation that goes to the Stadium and Exposition District. That's a state agency. So is the Montreal Convention Center Authority. That's created. You would have to go to the legislature. And whether there's much interest in changing that, Governor Edwards has expressed a great deal of skepticism about the proposal. John Alario, the Senate president, is cool to the idea. It's difficult to see that she could change any minds.
Well, it seems like she's not taking no for an answer, certainly to start off.
She has
you
a
know.
big PR campaign going, hashtag campaign. I mean, she's doing kind of what she does, which is go directly to the people and trying to get them to get involved.
This political action committee that I think was ramped up a couple of months ago. I think Action New Orleans is you're going to see more and more of that. You're already seeing it if you on Facebook and some other social media. The question is, okay, who's going to carry the water for her at the legislature? I don't know of anyone in the delegation ready to do that yet. And is there any interest statewide in diverting this money? And she's got her work cut out for her.
And Steve Perry had, a counter.
Counter
right?
proposal is raise the hotel tax by about a little more than 0.5%. That would draw in about between $6 and $7 million, and that would be for a bond issue, to pay off a bond issue to maybe make some initial repairs and infrastructure upgrades, but also for studies and plans. The mayor's office says we've got plans. We need a steady stream of funding to implement some of the plans
And her
that we
immediate
have.
reaction to that proposal was not sufficient.
very
Not
cool.
inadequate.
Inadequate. Not
And
enough.
kind of another piece of this is she's now gone to the Superdome Commission and asked them for rent for that area, part of Champion Square, which the city owns,
Right.
and there were negotiations at some point for a land swap, and that never happened. So she has asked for $3.6 million in back rent plus some annual rent. Again, Superdome Commission controlled by the state. We'll see.
She sees
Well,
the
the
dollars
hotel-
there and she's trying to get them.
The hotel motel tax remains as the voters' favorite because they don't have to pay it.
Yeah.
It's a tax on people from out of town, and so that's
If there's a chance at the legislature, and there's some indication that some legislators, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter which side of the aisle, are not happy about dedications. Maybe you go at it from that angle. We dedicate too much money. Again, it's a tall political order for the mayor to try and get some of this money.
But the infrastructure argument, I mean, when we have these boil water orders, they affect hotels, they affect
certainly do.
restaurants. I mean, they definitely, the infrastructure, you would think, would be a strong selling point for
Okay.
some people.
We'll see how this argument plays out. Thanks a lot, guys. Errol, and talking about tourism, they're going to be coming this way for Carnival in early March is Mardi Gras.
Well, if you use 12th night as the measurement of when Carnival starts, which will be this Sunday, I think people are bursting already. Just in our office, we received 3 king cakes today. And here at the station, there was I saw that they received a king cake, and so the king cake industry is already in full gear, which, by the way, is really one of the growing aspects of Carnival. I think a key factor this year's Carnival is that it's March 5th, which is very late. The latest Carnival can possibly be is March the 9th. It doesn't happen very often, and it won't happen until 2039. But March 5th is very rare also. And the next time we'll have a Carnival this late will be in 2020, which will be March 5th. So if there's an advantage to being early or late, most people think, well, there's more of an advantage to being late. This is essentially a 2-month-long Carnival season, going from 12th night until March 5th. And the further away you are from Christmas, the more recovery time people have emotionally and financially, and so it tends to help draw people a little bit better, more time to market Carnival. Some people say, well, the weather's going to be a little bit warmer too. In theory, yes, not necessarily. A few years ago, it was on March 4th, and that was a miserable day. It was a cold and damp day, but in theory, the later it is, the better. So I think it's going to be a big Carnival season. There's a lot more participants in Carnival. This new generation of New Orleanians, a lot of growth in Carnival activity and around the Marigny, Bywater area. More smaller groups doing smaller parades, and so that's happening. More enthusiasm, which I think a good movement is towards being a little bit more environmentally friendly in terms of the throws. So there's good activity. I think there's good energy, and of course in Jefferson Parish, where the parades have struggled a bit over the past few years, there's this new plan to change the direction of the parades so that they start at the Clearview end and wind up around Bonneville, thinking that they'll reach the family areas at a more favorable time. So.
Well, late Mardi Gras gives us more time to sample all of those new types of king cakes too, because we just keep seeing new types of king cakes come on board.
That too, there's more king cakes than ever, very creative. I got to tell you, someone bought a gluten-free king cake here, and I'm not ready to endorse that yet. But I think the advent of things like FedEx have made possible the king cakes to be a global industry now. And now the Vietnamese have moved into and some of the finest king cakes is being done with the Dom Phong or something, that they're doing just a great king cake, and so they've moved into that industry too.
Okay, we look forward to the season. Thanks
Okay.
a lot, Dee. Stephanie, political season also.
Another season, yes.
Yeah, that's around the same time in March where you know, we'll see legislature come into session, but a lot of legislators are not going to be there.
Correct. It's interesting. So we had elections in 2015. The next elections are this year. 15% of the people elected in that last election are gone already for various reasons. They've moved on to other jobs. They've just walked away. Some of them have gone into the administrative side. And it's more turnover there than we've had, and I think it's for a number of reasons. One is it's kind of depressing for a lot of them to be in the legislature these days. Think about all the special sessions. Think about the intense partisan fighting. And think about the budget frustration. One of the positive things about being in the legislature is you get to send the bacon home. You get to do projects back in your district. And that's become very difficult under the financial constraints we've had. And it's interesting. I think one group where you're really seeing some turnover is that moderate Republican group. There's a very conservative Republican group that's really battled with the governor on fiscal affairs over, taxes and things like that. And then there's a group of Republicans that has tried to work with him, tried to mediate and basically say, we have to raise some taxes. What are we, just be the middle, the political middle, and that I think has been a particularly frustrating place to be in this environment, and a number of people have walked away. A guy from Hammond, Chris Broadwater, Rob Shadowin recently. And then the other thing that is happening is term limits. So term limits, if you remember, was passed, this is a long-running story, it was passed back in 1995. David Vitter pushed it, Jay Darden, and starting then, everybody got 12 years, 3 terms, the chance to run starting then, so even if you're already in the legislature. So you had one big year of turnover in 2007. That's 12 years after, so that's when people who had served all that time had to leave. Some left, some House members went to the Senate. This is the next one. This is 12 years after that. So we have a really big group that is termed out, and it's the old timers. It's the people who've been around forever. You mentioned Senate President John Alario. He's still saying he may go back and run for the House. He's been in the legislature for decades. We'll see. But he has been House Speaker, he's been Senate President, he's been really the most influential lawmaker for a very long time. He's out. People like Danny Martini from Metairie, Conrad Appel, Jack Donahue from St. Tammany in New Orleans, Walt Leger, the Speaker Pro Tem, J.P. Morrell, a really prolific senator, Neil Abramson. So we're going to have a lot more turnover this year. We're going to have a lot of competitive races, I think. But we're going to lose a lot of institutional knowledge.
And some in the House are going to seek the Senate.
And then that's the case too, because if senators are termed out and the House members are turned out, they can run. It's more usual to go from the House to the Senate than Senate to the House, although it can go the other way. So you have Cameron Henry, for example, who's the very controversial appropriations chairman. He'll probably run for Conrad Appel's open Senate seat. Kirk Talbot, another Jefferson Parish rep, will probably run for Senate. So that will happen too.
So it'll be interesting statewide politics this year.
It will, yes.
Okay.
And then it's all looking at redistricting coming up after the census. That's
There have been studies in other places, I think in California, that once they put in term limits, then in effect that weakens the legislature. And when you weaken the legislature, the bureaucracy gets stronger because they're the ones who are there all the time and they know their way
right.
around.
And then the other argument is the lobbyists get stronger because they're the ones who are there all the time too.
Okay, well,
Yes.
we're in for it this year
Yes,
then.
we are.
Okay, thanks. Quickly over to you, Jeff. Real quick word about the Pelicans.
Well, there's good news and bad news. I mean, the good news is no one has run away with the NBA Western Conference. It's more wide open than it's been in the past years when Golden State has dominated. But the bad news is the Pelicans are having a miserable start. We're almost halfway through the season. They're second to last in the Western Conference, 14th of 15 teams. They have the third worst road record in the league, and they've got 5 of their next 7 games on the road. So we're going to find out really quickly if this team's able to make a run and get back in the playoff picture, or I think regress. And it's a really critical crossroads season for the organization because they've got to show Anthony Davis that they can be a contender. I mean, this is a superstar, generational talent, and he has the opportunity here to sign a max contract in July that would pay him $239 million over 5 years. If he doesn't sign that, I think the writing's on the wall.
It's Chris
that he
Paul
wants to
all over
leave.
again, right?
Yes, it's all over again, and the organization may have to trade him. Otherwise, they run the risk of him walking in a year later and them getting nothing for him. So it's a critical season. I think they've got to make some moves to try and get back in it.
Well, earlier in the season, I mean, we would see them lose, but then for a spate there, they were winning. And so what goes on with that?
Well, look, they have won back-to-back games since mid-November. You know, that there's no consistency in any part of their game. There's no identity. I know they've had some injuries, but a lot of teams have injuries. I think that's an excuse. They need some kind of shakeup out there on Airline Drive with that organization. I think something may come at some point because I think they either make a trade or make some changes to some people that are in charge because it's not working out the way they expected. And I think Gail Benson, in her first year as sole owner, I think is going to want to see some progress.
What kind of attendance are we seeing at the games, the home games?
Well, actually, it's still, fairly good, relatively speaking. I mean, considering the record right now is 16-21. But that's, I think, attributable to last year, the way the team finished last year more than anything else.
Okay, well, we hope that they can pull it together. Time to look ahead, E.
Well, this week the Cantrell administration was true to its promise and turned off a lot of traffic cameras. Turned off 20 out of 30 that are located outside the school zones. And the one in school zones, they reduced the hours in which they're effective.
Okay. Steph?
Looking back to New Year's Eve, the Cantrell administration did something new. We didn't just have fireworks downtown, we had them all around town. And I think it was very popular. There was in the east and on the river, further uptown and in City Park. I'm interested to see whether this becomes an annual thing. I think a lot of people would like it to be.
Yeah, I know some friends who went into the parking lot of a business on Magazine Street and watched it there in Uptown.
And it was
They
early
wouldn't have
years.
seen it
There were
otherwise,
people with kids, and
Right.
you don't have to deal with the quarter.
Right.
It's a nice thing. Yeah.
Right.
Well, look, if you're going through your post-holiday hangover and you're looking for something to do, next weekend, January 12th on Saturday, they're going to have the 4th annual Dolly Should Festival. It's a Dolly Parton festival in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. It's about an hour's drive away. Lots of fun festivities over there. It coincides with their second Saturday, which is always the thing to do over in Bay St. Louis. We were talking about it's a quaint little town over there. Great festival.
And it's really come back well since the storm.
Very much.
Okay, Kevin.
And in the coming weeks, the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, based here in New Orleans, will be the center of attention for a while. I'm not sure when arguments, but we'll start seeing briefs soon. The Affordable Care Act, a judge's decision in Texas that declared it unconstitutional, will be before the 5th Circuit, and ultimately going to go to the Supreme Court, almost certainly.
All righty. Thanks a lot, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.